for the things that I want to see come out, it does take that time. So if you're to see it like I was seeing it, I ask of you that same thing. Now, the same thing is with the patience on getting this project done. There are all kinds of people who, tell me, now look, get this thing done. I want to see it before I die. And I tell them, well, me too. I'd like to see it also. But some of these things take a while, and that there is an art that takes longer than something that is presented in image is interesting. There are interesting things that happen with very quick images too, as in subliminal images. And that's another thing that's quite interesting too, that interests me as well. That's even on the other extreme. So I guess that's the best I can answer that. Again? Yes? You? Right?
Buonasera. Volevo chiedere se ci racconta dell'esperienza che possiamo vedere tutti qua vicino a Varese, in Villa Panza, e soprattutto come si relaziona al cielo in punti così diversi, magari della Terra.
Well, first of all, I had a life in the sky as a pilot, so I saw all kinds of conditions, many of which, as in the Wedgeworks, I tried to bring into the smaller scale. So this life in the sky made me sensitive to many things, and I'm interested that people do look up, which is, if you're in New York, it's amazing. You can see people walking below that never look up. So this idea that we kind of look out of the maze is interesting. And remember that pilots have certain derogatory names for people who don't fly. And that would be, one of them is a ground pounder. That's one nice name. But generally we see people as being down in the maze. That is, a lot of their direction is found by turns. This is kind of Hull versus Tolman in psychological studies, where they would take people through a maze, or take rats through a maze by having them negotiate this maze. And also they had other ones that were on a wheeled cart that they would actually push through it, but they weren't doing it themselves physically. And you may have noticed that when people drive to a destination, they can get there, they find it again very easily. But if they're sometimes the passenger, they go there, they don't necessarily learn it quite as well. This is very interesting. But anyway, this idea of people down in the maze not having the same sort of perception. As soon as you learn to fly, the first thing you do is you realize when you're up in the air, you can see sometimes 40, 100 miles, but you can't find the airport. It's really a very interesting thing at first learning to fly, because this idea of plan view or looking down it takes a while to get used to. And that is one of the biggest things that happens, this sort of different sense of territory that happens when you make this ocean of air your territory. Now, in terms of kind of thinking about these spaces and what the spaces have to do, having people look places where they don't look normally, or become sensitive to things that they're not normally sensitive to. This is actually the day job of an artist. And they can do that with many different kinds of, some things sociological, like the pop artists were very interested in your getting to look at kind of the art of regular day human life and of advertising and of things like that, to open yourself up to that. And I think that they did a good job of that. And you see this in all kinds of art, where generally you have this strange disconnect between the audience and the artist. I mean, the artist is actually doing something, not necessarily what the audience is thinking about. Often people come and they look at art and they think, do I like this or not? Would I like to own this or not? I can tell you that that's the last thing on the artist's mind as to whether they, in any form or fashion, substantiate your taste. If anything, they'd like to challenge your taste, to expand your taste, perhaps even shock it. So there's a strange disconnect with what artists are generally doing and what people who are the audience have in coming to it. And in my thinking about that, particularly with light and space, and particularly the sky, I'm very interested to bring some of these things that I have seen down into this level, but also to direct your attention to something, to an area or a place or a part of life where you haven't normally been directing it. So a lot of that is just sort of a change in attending and what you'd like, where I would have you look. And some pieces are more powerful or more interesting and satisfying that than others. I can't tell you that this is happening in every piece I make. Is that getting a little bit close to, I'm not sure I really answered your question. Okay. Yes. Here comes the microphone. Okay. Thank you.
Io sono una giovane studentessa di storia dell'arte e l'ho incontrata per la prima volta a Venezia e appunto abbiamo avuto l'occasione di sentire una lezione magistrale e ho avuto poi l'occasione di discutere con altri studenti della mia età sull'importanza anche etica di un lavoro come il suo e che appunto insegnandoci, facendoci rendere conto di percepire, ci insegna, secondo me e secondo noi, io in questo momento sono portavoce di un gruppo di studenti, proprio a relazionarci in modo diverso al presente, ed è una cosa che noi non abbiamo riscontrato in molte altre esperienze artistiche e soprattutto non nel sistema dell'arte come ci si offre oggi. Quello che volevamo chiedere è come pensa di sopperire al problema della fruibilità di alcune delle sue opere, soprattutto del Roden Crater, perché penso che molti in futuro vorranno venire a visitarlo.
Well, first of all, to stand up for all art, I'll have to say that there is art here that please go and look at again closely. I mean, there is a wealth of sculpture and painting and in this history of art that Italy has been so proudly the major player that a lot of people here sort of forget about it, don't notice it, walk by it. And again, you have to really give it time to enter the world that the artist was in. I have to tell you that yes, the artist had this different viewpoint of not necessarily satisfying your taste, but that in terms of what their work is, that it's quite remarkable once you enter it. So if you take time on many of the pieces that are here, I think you'll find that same sort of realm, and really think about what the artist is up to and what they're bringing about, because some things are very interesting. For instance, there was a time when Rodin was doing sculpture in Paris, and he was really put down because they thought he was no longer sculpting the nude. His statues, his pieces were naked, somehow lascivious, somehow charged with a different sexuality than other work had been before, and I look at them, I can't see that. This is work done, jewels. This is something that was accomplished, so that all art is contemporary art. It had to be made when it was now. So we are, I think, obliged to understand the now. First of all, the now that we live in. So that's why it's somehow difficult to take contemporary art today, because it's actually made by our contemporaries, who we know better about. But also to think about it when you see these older pieces that we tend to just go by. I mean, there's a wealth of art here in this city, look at it and try to understand the context it was made in, and understand how this change is something that we now are a result of. And this is really, I think, a very important issue, because I am an art lover. My first teacher was Salvatore Grippi, who was a student of Morandi. So I was shown many of Morandi's works, which I came to find quite amazing. And that had a lot to do with this idea of simplicity. And in talking about it, he said that he talked about the swan that was gliding across the lake. Underneath, it's paddling like hell. You somehow have this other perception when seen, all the work that goes into something that's very simply stated, very much like a mathematical proof. In other words, it's not just that you prove something by brute force, but the more elegant proof will arrive at QED in the fewest, most succinct steps. And that makes a proof that has beauty or elegance. And those ideas were something that was very interesting to me to hear about, and how they also would relate to art as well. That you don't accomplishing it with seemingly a lot of work. And so that, yes, it does take work to do that. And in getting to a proof, you can go through years to finally prove something. But doing it with elegance is an important part of it. So I would say that, it's not just certain work. There's a lot of work that once you really get into it and really look at it and figure out its context in relationship to yours now, that you can really come to enjoy. And with Road and Crater, there will be people that come to it and people that don't. I mean, it's not, again, for everyone. We can only have 24 people stay over each night at the present. So that's not very many people, but at 365 days, that begins to add up after a while. So anyway, I think that's enough. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this, and I am very proud to have been a part of this this week, or 2 weeks actually, that you have been doing here. And of course, I really think that my daughters, I have 2 daughters who are doctors, they reacted to their father being an artist, and they actually are doing work, and they ought to be here. So thank you again.
Ringrazio tutti, buonasera.
A little bit, I'd be okay.